Once upon a time inside the busy city of Banjo, lived a famous prostitute named Sira, changed into an incredibly lovely female, who offered her frame to guys for money, not worrying approximately her reputation or the reality that her father was a renowned pastor. Her extremely good abilities in the bedroom drew men of various types to her, but Sira handiest selected men that she believed were rich. Her customers' base have been full of politicians and businessmen who may want to come up with the money for to sponsor the type of existence that she so wanted, a life complete of luxurious wearing. She ought to have enough money, something that she desired. Sira, despite being a prostitute, nevertheless made out time to wait her father's church. She could sit on the again, sporting her skimpy, get dressed, as she listened to her father pontificate at the pulpit. She changed into this sort of rebellious girl who chose to be the black sheep of her circle of relatives. Her sisters were not anything like her. However, Sarah did now not care. She went from one hotel to the other servicing the several men that she slept with. Sira did now not care if the guys were married or no longer. All she wanted was their cash, and Sarah ensured that she stood by, using her rule by no means to intervene with their personal lives at the same time as her buddies were running to make ends meet. Sira turned into busy taking place luxurious journeys to countries that her friends should only dream of sooner or later. Sra got a name from one in every of her numerous guys. He changed into a wealthy oil Mongol who returned to the USA. A few days in the past, Sira never ignored to peer him whenever he arrived the country due to all the high-priced gifts that he continually were given for her. The ultimate time he become round, he were given her a new Mercedes, and Sarah become over the moon at once. She were given his name. She quick dressed up in one of her beautiful dresses and got into her vehicle, the equal vehicle that he got for her some time ago. As she drove to his inn, she approached a sight visitor's light and needed to stop. Her automobile glass become up, and her air circumstance chilled her whole frame. Her favorite song was on, and Sira sat there as she waited for the sight visitor's light to ultimately turn green. An old girl who was hawking bubble gum and candies knocked on her window and pleaded for her to shop for. Sira omitted the woman at the beginning, but after, even as she found out that the bubble gum she were given a few days in the past had finished, so she wound down her glass and picked some bubble gum from the woman, who thanked her substantially as she paid for them. As Sira puts the gum in her bag, the visitor's mild grew to become inexperienced, and he or she proceeded to the resort to meet her rich customer. As she pulled up within the driveway of the hotel, Sira popped open one of the bubble gums and threw it in her mouth. She walked majestically to the inn room and met the person who she had come to see. Sira stood through the bed, excited to look him once more. After several months he held her in his arms because the boat approached the mattress, ready to have a few a laugh, whilst all of a sudden an abnormal hand emerged from in among her legs and gave him a very hot slap, the type of slap that echoed across the room like thunder. The person stumbled backwards, grabbing his face as his eyes widened in horror. What the hell was that? He screamed as his voice trembled. Sir froze, unable to recognize what become taking place. She seemed down slowly, her heart pounding in her chest as she stared at the hand protruding from among her thighs. Sira screamed out in terror. As she surpassed out at the ground, she woke up a couple of minutes later to find herself on my own within the room. The person she had come to look turned into nowhere to be observed, and Sira could not blame him for going for walks. She stared down at her tie and found out that the abnormal hand became nowhere to be discovered. Sira, shocked and confused, determined to move again home. She couldn't understand what had just befell, and she became too terrified to speak to each person about it. However, that was most effective. The beginning the next morning, Sarah sat on her bed wrapped in her silk robe, seeking to persuade herself that it changed into all a dream. It cannot be real, she stated to herself as she attempted to convince herself that she may simply be drunk. But while she stood in the front of her bathroom, reflect and unfold her legs open to inspect it herself, she screamed again. The hand changed into back, a small wrinkled hand that terrified her to the bone. Sira stood there petrified As she gazed at the extraordinary hands among her legs, she failed to recognize what to do or a way to make it leave. As she stood there burdened, her cell phone commenced to ring. It became Lamine, her first-class buddy, the simplest man that Sira had surely cared for, who never noticed her as a device to treatment his lustful pleasure. Sira hesitated. As the cell phone continued to ring, she glanced at the display screen, questioning if she ought to peek or no longer, whilst all of a sudden her doorbell rang. It became Lamine, and Sira became now not inclined to allow him see her in such a state, so she fast rushed to her wardrobe and wore an incredibly long get-dressed to assist her conceal the hand that crept out of her frame. Then lightly, she walked to the door where Lamine stood looking so worried. "Are you okay?" he asked. Sir, who did all she may want to pretend that she became pleasant. But Lamine knew better than to believe her. He pressed on, however, Sir, become now not inclined to allow him recognize what changed into occurring. She believed she could type it out alone. However, as the days went by, it became clear that she became incorrect. Sira had visited numerous spiritualists who discovered that someone so near her changed into behind the curse. One even tried to deliver her from the hand. However, the peculiar hand slapped him throughout the face, causing him to fall to the ground. Subconscious, Sira sat in her living room by myself as she attempted to determine out who ought to have accomplished this to her. In that moment, she remembered the old lady who bought bubblegum to her in visitors. Sira felt a cold chill run down her backbone, the female's piercing eyes and crooked smile, the unusual way she bowed slightly after handing her the gum. Sira may want to sense it deep within herself that the lady became now not regular. She jumped to her toes and grabbed her keys. Sira drove immediately to the junction wherein she met the vintage lady, but while she were given there, the female was nowhere to be discovered. She rolled down her car glass and asked a few providers, who seemed no longer to know who the vintage girl turned into. She requested several people and became about giving up, while she came throughout a young female who discovered that she knew in which the antique woman lived. Sira accompanied the younger lady, who instructed her so many unsettling things about the old woman, how her 5 kids died in an area of 12 months, and how people believed that she was in the back of their death. "You need to be careful, because this lady is so risky," the younger girl warned Sir, who nodded in silence as her heart pounded in her chest. They ultimately arrived the residence, and the young girl who took her to the house ran away, leaving her there on my own. Sira walked out of her automobile and approached the house, goosebumps filling her complete body as she knocked at the door. After numerous knocks, no one spoke back, and Sarah decided to push open the door. The door creaked open, and Sarah walked into the residence, curious about what she might discover. She walked from room to room and observed how dusty the house was. It became as though no person had lived in it for years, and Sira couldn't believe how a person could live in a residence as dusty as this. She walked around for some minutes and arrived the room which she believed was the antique woman's room. Inner had been stacks of bubble gum at the table, surrounded by using candles which dispatched chills down her backbone. Sira could not threat being determined in the house, so she turned round and left, her coronary heart beating like a drum. She drove domestic, questioning what she could do with the witch who had made her lifestyles a dwelling hell. No guy became willing to sleep together with her now after all the things that they'd heard about her. Sira did now not know a way to continue to exist for a lot of these years. She had squandered her money, believing that she usually had what it took to make greater. But now, seeing the unusual hand among her legs, Sira knew that she become doomed. She needed to find a manner to dispose of the hand, and this she needed to do fast. Sira arrived home and met her first-class friend Lamine, who became status in the front of her house. He had known as her for over 20 instances and couldn't help but worry. He stood there and watched as Sir approached him, searching. So broken and unhappy, Lamine this time needed to recognize what turned into going on. He pressed to recognize, and Sir subsequently broke down. Tears spilled down her cheeks as she clutched his shirt and advised him all that was going on. Lamine couldn't agree with his eyes. "How will you have a hand among your legs?" he asked Sira, who broke down in tears as Lamine pulled her right into a hug. He should experience the pain in her voice and could not stand to see her cry. Sira told him about the bubble gum, and the antique lady who offered it to her that night. That it came about, I recognize she's in the back of it. All she stated to Laman, who stood still for a second, as he concept deeply, how about we pay your father a go to you realize he's a pastor. Laman stated to Sir, who killed the concept on the spot. We cannot probable visit my father for a thing like this, she stated to Laman, who attempted to persuade her otherwise, but Sira did not budge Laman's side and held her hand tightly. Sira, you've got gone to each spiritualist within the metropolis, and none of them ought to assist you. The best component left is to visit the one man who has prayed over people for decades. Your father. Sira stood up and started pacing the room. You don't apprehend. My father already believes I'm a shame to the own family. You know what it'll imply to reveal up in his house and inform him I've a hand between my legs slapping guys in mattress. Sira broke down again. I cannot do it, Lamine. I can't face him, not like this. Laman stood up and walked towards her. I understand how tough it may additionally seem. Oh, he is your father. Sure, he would possibly react harshly at the start, but one component I realize for certain is that he could not turn his again on you now, not on this kingdom. But Sira had her mind already made up, no longer to contain her father. She made up her thoughts to force the old female to opposite the curse. She did this to me, and she ought to take it away, she stated to herself angrily. And she, or he, arranged for a few thugs to bring the vintage girl to her. They arrived at the vintage girl's house and observed the location completely empty, no chairs, no mattress, and no bubble gums. Nobody knew wherein she went, and Sira could not consider that she changed into now lower back to rectangular one. Devastated, she called on Laman, who knowledgeable her that he turned into domestic along with his girlfriend Abeni. Come to my house, he said to Sira, who advised him that she become on her way. A couple of minutes later, Sarah obtained a name from her father, who called to invite how she changed into doing. She iced over, as it had been over a year considering she last spoke to her father on the smartphone. Even when she visited his church on a few Sundays, she sat on the returned and made no contact with him. Her father, by no means known as her at the smartphone specifically, after he found out that she was a prostitute, and attempted to talk her out of it, but Sira refused, stating that her part changed into one of a kind. I cannot stay a dull lifestyles like you, father, she stated to her father, who advised her that he would not stand back and watch Sira live below his roof as a prostitute. This became the day that Sira packed up her luggage and left her father's house into the house provided to her by way of one in every of her numerous men. The recollections got here rushing back as Sira picked up her father's call. Good day, Daddy, she said, as everywhere fell silent. Her father spoke up some seconds later, revealing that he saw something in a dream. You have been in chains, Sira, however no longer the sort product of iron. You're screaming for assist, but nobody may want to hear you. I have been praying all morning. Inform me what is occurring. Sira could not solution. Her throat tightened as tears started to drop from her eyes. Daddy, I cannot talk now, however maybe quickly I'll call you, she stated to her father, who assured her that God loves her. The line went lifeless, and Sira wiped her tears and persisted to power to Laman's residence. A couple of minutes later, she arrived at the residence and met Laman's girlfriend, who informed her that Laman had to rush off to the workplace to drop off something for his boss. You will be again soon, she said to Sira, who sat down to wait. Abeni could not help, however, be aware how sad she appeared. Is the whole thing okay? She asked Sir, who burst out in tears. My lifestyles has been ruined, she said to Abeni, who she narrated the whole ordeal to. Abeni in that second informed her of a effective priestess, who cured her uncle of his lifelong madness. Sira's interest picked as she pleaded with Abeni to take her to the priestess. Abeni held her hand tightly. I can, but you need to apprehend Mama Kumba isn't a person you visit with a proud coronary heart. She sees proper through your soul. In case your intentions are no longer smooth, she'll send you away. Sir wiped her tears and nodded. I have nothing left to be pleased with. Please, Abeni, take me to her, she pleaded, as Abeni took her to the house of the priestess. After they arrived, the priestess took a very good have a look at her, and asked a query that she by no means saw coming. What did you do to Laman to warrant this type of punishment from him? The priestess requested Sira, who iced up in shock, to listen the sort of question her excellent buddy Lamine, the only one she trusted with all that she got. Sira could not incorporate her tears. And she, or he felt her heart destroy, in a way that she in no way predicted. Even Abeni stood there frozen too. Recognized that her boyfriend became the one at the back of all that have been happening to Sira the priestess, then exceeded her a sponge to use to take her tub in the dead of night. When you are done with the bathtub, make sure you don't sleep till morning, or else the hand will kill you earlier than it is killed. Tira thanked Abel and the priestess as she lowered back home, sad to realize that her great pal Lamine turned into the one behind her struggling. She sat on her bed in tears, as Lamine called her wide variety repeatedly. However, Sira refused to peek. She waited till midnight, and did because the priestess had cautioned. She baited with the sponge, and stayed conscious all night, hoping for the peculiar hand to vanish. And in reality, as the priestess had stated, the hand disappeared. Sira turned into now unfastened from the evil hand. But her friendship with Laman became forever damaged. She in no way lower back his motive. She failed to actually have the need to the pain of betrayal, turned into deeper than the disgrace of her past, due to the fact this time it came from the one person she relied on the most. Sra had learned her lesson from the whole lot that had occurred. She determined to pay her father a go-to in church to supply her existence lower back to Christ. She arrived his church a couple of minutes later, and ran into someone that she in no way predicted, the antique woman, who she accused of being in the back of her suffering. She changed into sitting there in church crying as she prayed, and Sira could not agree with her eyes. She approached the woman to apologize for ever believing that she became a witch, and the lady narrated her entire story to her, how her youngsters have been all secret mobile providers that died in spite of all that she did to keep them. The antique lady instructed her how after dropping them one by one, the rumors of her being a witch chased her out of her neighborhood and almost killed her spirit. She informed Sira, human beings fear what they do not recognize. Child, my only mistake become searching ordinary. And once I sold that bubble gum to you, I saw sadness on your eyes. I failed to realize what it became, but I prayed for you that night and were given a revelation. It may appear as though you're unfastened. However, you've been certain by someone who holds a first-rate grudge in their hearts for you. Sira already knew who that someone was. She smiled at the woman and informed her that she knew already, and the woman requested her if she knew why, and Sira could not answer the question. She had not noted. Laman's requires see you later, and by no means were given the possibility to realize why he did such a horrible thing to her. Sira sat quietly to listen to what the vintage man had to say. She listened as the female found out to her that Abeni was the one in the back of all of it. Sira opened her eyes extensive in surprise. What do you mean it is Lamine that is at the back of it? She stated to the girl, who informed her that his female friend Abeni desired her to accept as true, with that it turned into Laman. Abeni by no means preferred you around her guy. She desired him all to herself. However, Laman could not shut up about you. You were constantly there stealing the eye, and Abeni did not adore it. At point she believed that Laman loved you deeply. So she did what she did to you to ensure that Laman by no means sleeps with you. Sir's heart sang because the reality hit her like a violent storm. All the even as it was now not Laman, she concept to herself. As she realized that she were played, the entirety started to make sense now. The unexpected problem from Abeni, her offer to help taking her to the equal priestess, who inflicted her with the curse within the first place. It had all been a calculated plan to separate her from Laman. Sira stood still inside the church, her palms trembling, because the antique woman gently held her shoulders. You have to confront the truth, my toddler, now, not the whole lot broken, changed into supposed to live damaged. She stated to Sarah, and he or she needed her good fortune, and walked away that evening. Sarah back home and locked herself in. She sat there, an idea deeply knowing that when the curse came, none of the powerful guys she had been with got here looking for her. They didn't call, they failed to care. It was Lamin who stayed Lamin, who involved Lamin who held her while she cried. And he, or she had thrown that away based totally on a lie with braveness that she hadn't felt in years. Tira picked up her phone and dead Lamin's variety, he picked on the primary ring. And Sira pleaded for them to talk they met. A few hours later underneath, the antique mango tree close to the church that they used to sneak off to. As teenagers, Lamin stood together with his fingers in his pockets, searching damaged and uncertain. Tira walked slowly closer to him, her eyes full of tears. I recognize the reality now. She said, her voice cracking, "It wasn't you, it was never you." Lamin looked up, a glimmer of remedy flashed in his eyes. It was a Benny, she persevered, she cursed me, because she thought he cherished me. Lamin stepped closer, his voice company. And honest she changed into right, Sira iced up. I cherished you, Sira, I've loved you, considering we were kids even whilst you. Driven all and sundry away, even whilst you have become the girl the world whispered about, I nevertheless cherished you. However, I in no way had the braveness to say it. And that I failed to need to be one greater man who used you. I desired to be the only who stayed. Sira broke down in tears as she wept. In his hands, I'm so sorry, Lamine, I turned into blind. I did not recognize love, even when he stared me in the face. Lamin held her hand and professed his love for her. He promised never to depart her facet. And Sira couldn't help, however, cry. She requested approximately a Benny, and became informed that Benny. Left without a word, she knew I'd in no way forgive her. Lamin stated softly, she become continually insecure about you. I simply failed to understand how deep her hatred ran. Sira shook her head slowly, the weight of the whole lot urgent down on her shoulders, but in place of crumbling, she stood tall. SRA reconciled along with her father and sisters. She stood one Sunday before the complete church, and advised her story no longer out of shame, however, as a sworn statement. She shared how all the guys she idea loved her deserted her in her darkest second. The church embraced her as she left prostitution in the back of, and became a counselor to women, the use of her tale to encourage others to find a higher direction. Sira sooner or later married Lamin, and he lives fortuitously ever after. The lesson to be learned from this tale is that chasing luxurious on the cost of reality and love can result in emptiness and betrayal. Sira learned that those who in reality care for you will continue to be even when life turns unpleasant. It also well known shows that envy can wear the mask of friendship, and that healing often starts when we confront our beyond, accept love, and pick out. To alternate her adventure indicates that redemption is viable for absolutely everyone inclined to stand the fact, make amends, and stroll a new direction with humility. I'm hoping you loved the tale.